Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here because today we're tackling something we literally all do every single day, yet we rarely stop to think about how it actually works. I'm talking about human communication. For a really long time, we've thought about talking and listening in, well, incredibly basic terms, almost like a robotic, one-way street where I just throw a message at you and you catch it. But as you'll see today, the true shapes of communication are far more complex, dynamic, and honestly, downright fascinating than that. Okay, let's dive right into this old assumption. For decades, early theories treated communication pretty much like a machine. You had a sender, you had a message, and you had a receiver. It was a straight line. But think about your own life for a second. When you're having a heated debate with a friend, or reading a news article, or just reacting to the room you're sitting in, is it ever just a clean, straight line? No way! Human interaction is messy, it's constantly evolving, and it is highly dependent on our relationships. Notice the stark contrast here between the old and the new. Early frameworks, like the Berlow or Shannon-Weaver models, were heavily biased toward this one-way, mechanistic transmission. And sure, they were great for understanding structured information flow, but they totally missed the human element. Today, we're exploring dynamic models. These frameworks completely shift the focus. They view communication as relational, evolving, and circular. Basically, they care about mutual understanding, feedback, and how we share meaning. So, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to track this evolution through 4 distinct shapes. First, the triangle of Newcomb's ABX model. Second, the filter of Wesley and MacLean. Third, the cycle of Kincaid's convergence model. Fourth, the spiral of Dance's helical model. And finally, a quick conclusion on how all this impacts our daily lives. Section 1, the triangle, Newcomb's ABX model. Let's get into it. We begin in the 1950s with Theodore Newcomb. He did something pretty radical for his time. He completely removed the message as a separate entity from his communication diagram. Instead, he shifted the entire focus to social relationships. To really get Newcomb, you've got to grasp this concept of social equilibrium. He argued that the main purpose of communication isn't just to pass along data. It's actually a tool we use to maintain a state of balance, or equilibrium, within our social systems. Essentially, we communicate to sustain our relationships with other people. He visualized this whole thing using a triangular format. A represents the sender, B is the receiver, and X is the matter of concern. Now, that X could be a third person, a topic, or maybe a policy. For example, imagine the relationship between a student and a teacher. That's A and B. They're interacting, but their relationship is constantly being affected by X. In this case, X might be a brand new school policy or a really difficult topic they're studying together. Now, this triangle is totally interdependent. So ask yourself, what happens when that student and teacher have totally different attitudes toward that policy? If A likes X but B doesn't, the triangle loses its balance. It's out of whack. According to Newcomb, A and B are now under immense social pressure to communicate. They literally have this urgent drive to talk, debate, and focus on X until they restore that equilibrium by adopting a similar attitude. The more important X is, the more urgent the need to communicate becomes. Section 2, the filter, Wesley and MacLean. Let's see how this builds from interpersonal triangles to the massive scale of mass communication. This 1957 model adapts Newcomb's work but adds a fascinating new layer, the environment. So the crucial point is, communication does not start when you open your mouth to speak. According to Wesley and MacLean, it actually begins when you react to environmental stimuli. You have to first perceive a message from your surroundings, like a sensory experience, before you ever form a response. You're reacting to your social and cultural reality before you ever create a message of your own. Now, this model applies to both interpersonal and mass communication, but they noted a massive difference in how feedback works between the two. When you talk to a friend, feedback is direct, it's rapid, but in mass communication, feedback is indirect and agonizingly slow, which really begs the question, who actually controls the message that reaches you through the media? Enter the gatekeeper. Because you obviously can't perceive every single environmental stimulus in the world, someone has to filter it for you. In mass communication, gatekeepers function as the editors or the recognized opinion leaders. They're the ones determining which messages are actually worthy of publication and assessing their potential impact. They literally filter our reality based on the needs of the audience and the media institution itself. And this filtering doesn't just happen in one place. It happens at multiple levels. It starts intimately at the individual level, like a person's own cultural biases. Then it scales up to routine practices on the job, communication organizations driven by editorial policies, broader social institutions, and finally, entire societies, which filter messages based on massive, broad societal values and norms. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we can objectively weigh this model. Its descriptive power is honestly incredible. It smartly includes feedback, environmental stimuli, and social factors. But its greatest strength is kind of also its biggest weakness. It is incredibly complicated. Furthermore, it's strictly two-dimensional, and surprisingly, it completely ignores noise. You know, the reality that information gets scrambled or misunderstood just traveling from point A to point B? Section 3. The cycle. Kincaid's convergence model. So how exactly do we fix that two-dimensional problem? Well, we jump forward to 1979 with D. Lawrence Kincaid and his convergence model. Kincaid reshapes our geometric journey from a filtered network into a mutual, collaborative cycle. He fundamentally believed that communication is not some simple, isolated occurrence. It's a transactional, collaborative process. The ultimate goal here isn't just one person successfully throwing a message at another. Rather, it's participants working together, sharing information, and actively striving to reach a common mutual understanding. Kincaid was actively fighting against the biases of those older models we talked about. Those older models viewed communication as linear and, frankly, they obsessed over persuasion. Kincaid, however, argued for a cyclical view focused entirely on mutual understanding and relationships. He pointed out that older models obsessed over discrete, spoken messages, whereas a true relational model gives importance to the spaces in between, the silence, the rhythm, the timing of how we interact. It's about mutual causation, not one-way mechanistic commands. Section 4. The spiral. Dance's helical model. This brings us to our final and perhaps most visually striking shape. We are zooming way out to a lifelong timeline, proposed in 1967. Dan's gives us a three-dimensional geometric view of communication, shaped like a helix. Think of a spring or a cone. Why a helix? Because Dan's uniquely combined the concepts of both linear and circular communication, arguing that neither was sufficient on its own. The helical model brings in the absolutely crucial element of time. It shows that communication is accumulative. Every single conversation you have is influenced by the foundational curve below it, your past behaviors, your past experiences, your past vocabulary. You never loop back to the exact same starting point. You're always evolving upward. And this brilliantly illustrates the concept using human development. At the very bottom, the small base of the helix is a newborn's cry at birth. That's the initial communication. As the child grows, the helix expands. Crying turns into expressing specific needs, like hunger. Then the spiral widens even more as they articulate simple words. Finally, it expands into intricate, complex adult communication. But here's the real beauty of it. The adult still retains the facial expressions and the foundational vocabulary learned all the way down at the base of that childhood spiral. It's all connected. Let's weigh the pros and cons of this 3D model. The advantages are profound. It recognizes communication as a continuous process, it shows exactly how we build on past experiences, and it beautifully visualizes relational growth over time. But it does have a significant blind spot. The disadvantages are that it lacks clear structural parts like a distinct sender or receiver, making it pretty hard to study systematically. It also ignores noise again, and most critically, it assumes communication always improves and expands over time, which, let's be honest, completely ignores real-life situations where a bad Wi-Fi connection or just a really stubborn argument causes our communication to totally break down. Section 5. Conclusion. The ever-evolving conversation. We've looked at triangles, filters, cycles, and spirals today. But how does all this abstract academic geometry actually apply to you and me? Well, here are your big takeaways. Understanding these 4 shapes empowers you to actually navigate your reality. From Newcomb, we learn to recognize when our relationships are out of balance and require communication to restore that equilibrium. From Wesley and McLean, we learn to be critical consumers of mass media, always aware that gatekeepers are quietly filtering our reality. From Kincaid, we're reminded to strive for mutual understanding rather than just trying to persuade or win an argument. And from Dance, we learn to respect the lifelong spiral, knowing our past is always informing our present. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. As you step away from this explainer and go talk to your family, your friends, or your colleagues today, ask yourself, how is your past shaping the communication spiral you are building today? Every single word you say is adding a new ring to your helix. Make it a good one. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.